prosecutor and former assistant United States attorney for the Northern District of Georgia, Francey Hakes, joins me. And Francey, I don't know about you, but this plea agreement that is now made public, that the defense and the prosecution wanted to keep apparently secret from the rest of us, is now public. Your thought about what you've read?
Well, I think the documents are pretty extraordinary, Greta, and I have made it through the transcript of the plea hearing yesterday, and it is also pretty extraordinary. I've been in hundreds of plea hearings in my career, and I have never seen one go like this. As you know, Greta, sometimes defendants will balk at the last minute when they're faced with a judge saying, yeah, here's your agreement, but you know I could sentence you to longer than that. Sometimes the defendant will say, you know what, never mind, let's go for that trial thing. But here you had a judge going through very different documents. You had the plea agreement and you had the diversion agreement. The diversion agreement had a paragraph, mysteriously, that paragraph 15, that the judge didn't get until right before the hearing, which is curious and should have raised her alarm bells, and apparently did, because that paragraph in the diversion agreement was an immunity clause, Greta, but it referred back to the plea agreement's factual allegations. So what it did in a very circuitous way was promise not to prosecute Hunter Biden for anything that's in the factual statement in the plea agreement, which is basically any of his potentially criminal conduct over a period of about 5 years. So it was blanket immunity, and yet the prosecutor kept saying that they were still investigating. And so the judge just could not figure out what was actually going on. The AUSA had to admit they had never done anything like this before. He could cite no precedent or law allowing for the judge to agree with the diversion agreement that references the plea agreement, but yet be only bound by the plea agreement. So she threw up her hands and said, I want you to write me briefs on this because I can't figure out what's happening. So it blew up.
My favorite line in the transcript, I got the transcript too, is the judge said, and she's really become a hero of mine. I mean, I had a different view of it until I saw the document, the plea agreement that has been kept from us until yesterday. But the judge says, why can't you do that in the normal way? I mean, it's like, if that doesn't say so much about what was going on, it's stunning. Now, let me ask you about the charges. Two of the charges are misdemeanors and involve tremendous amounts of money, just tremendous amounts of money. $1 million here, $666,000 there, and it's failure to pay income tax. Tell me, at what point in a prosecutor's head, that's a misdemeanor, failure to pay. At what point does failure to pay become tax evasion? If you're not paying, I mean, it's like, that's what I don't understand. Tax evasion is a felony. If you're not paying that money, at what point would a prosecutor say, you're doing more than just not paying, you're trying to evade taxes?
Well, Greta, what's so interesting about this is they actually, in court yesterday, got all the way up to the point where the judge normally would say, I accept your plea of guilty, and boom, he's considered convicted. So she went through all the factual allegations and asked Hunter Biden if he was on drugs when he willfully failed to pay his taxes. That is tax evasion. Literally what he admitted to in the courtroom under oath, because she swore him in first, under oath was tax evasion. The Department of Justice is twisting themselves into a pretzel in order to try and call this misdemeanor.
Twisting. I mean, it's just, we had a lawyer on last night who represented one of the whistleblowers, but he had a long history of doing tax cases as a prosecutor. I mean, when he was in the government, and he said they don't even know who the prosecutor is on this case. Apparently, they almost had like a rent-a-prosecutor show up in court. We don't know who's behind the curtain, who's making the decision. Is it David Weiss? Is it the Attorney General of the United States? Is it some line assistant? I mean, it's like, who's behind the curtain making the crazy deals? Not to mention paragraph 15, which is the most incredible getting out of jail free card.
Well, it is, and I almost felt sorry for the AUSA, although if I'd been him, I certainly would have just declined to appear in court on this.
Sorry for
when
him.
I couldn't explain it to the judge.
I don't feel sorry for him for one bit. I don't feel sorry for him one bit. This is his job to do it right and not to have some sleight of hand.
No, and I think that's why he said to her, truthfully, there is no precedent for this, because he was really put up against a wall. He tried to justify it. He was talking around it. He was selling it as hard as he could. But in the end, he couldn't convince the judge that there was anything at all about this that was appropriate or legal or constitutional.
Yeah. And you're kind to him, but he didn't say there's no precedent until she asked him. It wasn't like he came in and volunteered it. Like it wasn't like it was sort of like it wasn't Hunter Biden didn't come in and volunteer to pay his taxes. I mean, anyway, I'm gonna take the last word on that. Francey Hakes, always nice to talk to you.
Thanks, Greta.
Former U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Alabama, Jay Town, joins me. Okay, Jay, you like Francey, our former prosecutor, federal prosecutor. So tell me, how do you justify what the U.S. attorneys or what this prosecutor did in this case? Tell me, give me one legitimate explanation for this.
Well, they were just trying to clear this Biden case off their decks. That's all it is. And you know, to expand upon your earlier point, the diversion agreement is not approved by the judge. The diversion agreement is approved by the Federal Probation Office, and so that's pre-approved before they even walk in there.
But Jay, everybody in the courthouse knows that, and they tried to shove it off on the federal judge and make the federal judge be the one who's suddenly a branch of the executive branch prosecuting somebody. I mean, what prosecutor didn't know that one? Tell me.
Oh, no. What I'm saying is this was absolutely intentional by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Delaware to hide that immunity clause in not only a diversion agreement that's not approved by the court or by the judge, but also it typically doesn't become public. And it only became public because during the allocution phase, Hunter Biden said, well, there is this promise of immunity in the diversion agreement. So other than that, I don't have any other promises to induce my plea. And then she had to, that was the only reference in the plea agreement to the diversion agreement. And that's where this thing really blew up. And the judge, like you said, did a great job fashioning that out.
You know, I am less interested in investigating Hunter Biden on this than I am in investigating the U.S. attorneys, the prosecutors handling this, because they have a responsibility to citizens. I don't know what this sleight of hand sticking that paragraph in the diversion agreement, I don't know what that's all about. I understand a defense attorney and a defendant wanting the best deal possible. I did that day in and day out for my clients, but I want to know what's going on. I mean, they ought to have a special counsel to find out who's behind the curtain, who's making these bizarre deals on this. I mean, we have a right to know.
Well, and one more thing. Remember, Hunter said in the transcript that he signed the plea agreement that day. That tells me that it was waiting for him because it was drafted by the U.S. Attorney's Office. The U.S. Attorney's Office, in their statement of facts, it didn't have to be the long colloquy that it was, that integrated all of his business deals with CEFC and Burisma and all of these things. It could just say he owed tax in 2017 and didn't pay them. But instead, it really tried to include all of this double jeopardy, all of this behavior that he would be immune from because they knew what was in the diversion agreement.
I just don't understand, though. I mean, failure to pay tax, I get it. It's a misdemeanor. It's very common. I mean, but when you have this magnitude of money, at what point does a simple failure to pay morph into something that you're trying to evade? I mean, at what point? When this is not a small amount of money. And,
this is tax evasion.
I don't know the point, but I mean, failure to pay means tremendous amount of money.
Well, and there's multiple years there in the statement of facts. There's what's called a species evasion, which was where the Supreme Court said that if you don't pay your taxes in multiple years, that is evidence of intent and willfulness, your unwillingness to pay your taxes. You didn't just forget, it was on purpose. And that's sort of the element, the mens rea of tax evasion. And we see that here in the statement of facts, yet they're charging misdemeanors and diverting the most serious, readily provable offense, which is the 922G gun charge. I can't explain it. David Weiss is a friend of mine, but I can't explain what's going on in Delaware.
Well, he's going to be testifying soon. I hope sooner rather than later. He should be testifying next week and explain this before they work out whatever deal they're going to. But I think it's put off to the fall. J-Town, thank you.
Thank you, Greta.